The desert winds had long forgotten his name. Silas Vance lived in a crooked shack on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by coyote tracks and dust that never settled. Each sunrise found him at the same table, oil lamp dim, revolver resting beside a half-empty glass. He cleaned that gun like a preacher polishing a cross, even though it hadn't been loaded in years. Each bullet had its place. Each movement followed a rhythm only guilt could teach. He wasn't counting metal. He was counting sins. Silence was his companion, the only one that tolerated him. It was a heavy sort of quiet, the kind that seeps into bones and makes a man question the worth of drawing another breath. He lived off the land, spoke to nobody, and listened to the echo of memories that refused to fade. Some nights, when the wind curled through the broken window panes, he swore he heard hoof beats from another life. A younger Silas might have followed them. This one simply drank until they faded. Then came the knock, soft but certain. 3 taps, a rhythm that felt out of place, alive against all that dead air. Silas froze, his hand hovering above the revolver. Nobody ever came this far unless they wanted something. He let the silence stretch before answering, maybe hoping it would go away. It didn't. When he pulled the door open, the sight nearly stole his breath. A young woman stood there, small, travel-worn, eyes the color of storm clouds gathering over parched land. "Mr. Vance?" she asked, voice careful, as though testing the air. "I heard you help people when trouble comes." Her name was Eliza. She said a gang had ridden through the valley, burning cabins, running settlers off their land. She'd been told Silas could protect what was left of hers. The way she spoke carried weight far older than her years. He studied her quietly, a ghost recognizing something kindred. Then she mentioned her father, Caleb Hensley. The name hit him harder than whiskey ever could. His face tightened, pulse quickened, but he kept his tone calm. "Heard of him," he muttered, eyes shifting away. What he didn't say. He'd killed the man for 20 pieces of silver when greed outweighed decency. "I can pay," she added, offering a pouch he didn't touch. "I just can't fight them alone." Silas hesitated. He could have turned her away, like every other soul that drifted too close. But something in those eyes, something almost forgiving, pinned him to the spot. "Put that money away," he said finally. "I'll help, because it sounds right, too." When she stepped inside, dust swirled in her wake. The door shut behind her with a dull thud, sealing him in a reckoning he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. For the first time in 20 years, Silas felt the raw pulse of consequence. Somewhere between the sound of her boots and the whisper of the desert wind, he knew that knock hadn't come for help. It had come to collect on a debt long overdue. Cedar Creek came into view under a pale sky that looked scraped clean by wind. The place was smaller than Silas remembered towns being, just a handful of cabins strung along the bend of a dry creek. Smoke rose from one chimney like a thin question that didn't expect an answer. As they rode in closer, the damage told the story without words. Half-burned timbers leaned toward the earth, fencing lay trampled in strips, and the smell of singed wood lingered like a ghost unwilling to leave. Eliza dismounted first, staring at the wreck of her family's land. "They were here," she whispered. Her voice cracked somewhere between fear and fury. She moved through the ruins, brushing ash off a half-buried kettle, off the handle of a door that led nowhere. Silas followed slow. He'd seen this before. Different names, same ruin. A fence post cracked inward. Hoof marks looped back and overlapped. He crouched to trace one in the dirt. The heel carried a faint crescent groove, the mark of a custom spur worn by men who'd once called him brother. He closed his eyes a moment, tasting dust and regret. The trail sign was as clear as handwriting. Maddox's gang had been here. When he straightened, Eliza was watching him. "You know who did this?" she asked. He hesitated. "I might," he said, throat tightening on the lie. Men with no map in their heads, no conscience either. He turned from her before she could read more in his face. They spent the next hours in silence, gathering what could be salvaged. She found a cracked mirror, a bent cooking pan. He fixed a door hinge, using a nail pulled from his saddlebag. It wasn't enough to rebuild, but doing something felt better than standing still. Toward evening, he gathered wood and lit a fire in the field beyond the ruins. The flame painted his weathered face in copper and shadow. Eliza sat opposite him, coat wrapped tight, eyes on the ground. "Pa used to sit right here after work," she murmured. "Said the creek made him feel close to something bigger than himself." The memory made her smile, small and short-lived. He wasn't scared of dying, just of being forgotten. Silas didn't trust his own voice. He poked the fire instead, watching sparks twist upward into the black. "Men like him don't get forgotten," he said finally. "The world just takes longer to remember honest work." She looked up, searching his expression. "You sound like you knew him." He forced a faint shrug. "Known men like him," he said, then swallowed hard. The lie tasted bitter. The face of Caleb Hensley hovered behind his eyes, the quick smile, the startled look when the gun went off. He saw it every time he blinked. Night fell heavy. From the tree line came the creak of branches that weren't wind. Silas lifted his head, nostrils flaring slightly like an old hunting dog scenting danger. "We're not alone," he said. Eliza stiffened. Her hand went instinctively to the rifle by her bedroll. They sat still, listening. Hoofbeats circled once, far enough to be uncertain, but close enough to raise skin. Then silence again, thick as tar. Whoever watched them was too disciplined to approach yet. "Try to rest," he told her. "If they wanted a fight, we'd already be having one." He stayed awake till the moon reached its highest arc, eyes tracing the darkness for movement. By dawn, the watchers were gone. The ground bore their sign, a fresh set of tracks leading north. Silas recognized the pattern instantly. 4 riders, 2 heavy, 1 limping horse. It matched the shape of the gang he'd ridden with after Kansas City. The men he'd abandoned in the desert, thinking he could bury his sins where they'd never sprout. He ran a hand over the prints. "They'll come back," he muttered. "Always do." That day became a ritual of repair. They mended fences, righted scorched patio posts, and replaced charred boards on the barn door. The work kept Eliza's hands busy, and for a while her grief softened into tiredness. Silas found small comfort in the rhythm of wood and hammer, though every strike echoed like penance. She hummed as she rolled wire, a low tune that stilled the air around them. It reminded him of peace he didn't deserve. As sun dipped, the sky turned the color of copper coins. They shared biscuits by the fire, speaking little. Then she asked quietly, "Did you ever lose people? Folks you cared for?" He kept his eyes on the coals. "Yeah, lost most of them myself." She seemed to understand what he didn't say, that he was the reason they were gone. Later, the night came alive again with uneasy whispers. A bullet tore through the quiet, biting into the dirt inches from the fire. They both hit the ground. Silas grabbed his revolver before remembering it was still empty, a habit of repentance that now mocked him. He loaded 2 chambers fast, scanning the ridge. No second shot came. "They're playing with us," he said, rising slowly. "Faction likes to scare before they hit." He looked toward the shadows, his jaw hardening. "They're sending a message, and it's for me." Eliza stared at him. "Why you?" His answer was an exhale disguised as a laugh. "Because they already know my name." The fire snapped as if echoing that truth. The night returned to silence, but the peace was gone. Somewhere beyond the creek, old devils were stirring, drawn by the scent of the man who'd once ridden among them. Silas set another log on the flames, the sparks flaring against darkness like distant gunfire. The past had found its way home, and he could feel its eyes on him. They came at sunrise, 4 riders cutting through the mist like smoke through glass. Silas spotted them first, a line of silhouettes forming against the glare, riding hard and proud. Dust followed their horses in long trails, and at the front rode Colt Maddox. Even from 100 yards off, Silas could feel that familiar menace, the grin that once matched his own. The past hadn't just found him. It had saddled up and come back for a conversation. Eliza stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "You know them?" she said quietly. Silas didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the lead rider, one hand resting against the revolver at his hip. "Stay inside," he ordered. Maddox dismounted first, boots crunching on gravel. He was built like a coffin, wide, solid, inevitable. "Vance, the quiet shot," he called, voice carrying across the yard with a grin carved from cruelty. "Didn't think you'd be fool enough to stick around one town too long." The name hit the air like a curse. Eliza froze in the doorway. Her gaze flicked between the 2 men, comprehension beginning to form behind her shock. Silas stepped forward, shoulders squared against shame. "This land's under my watch now," he said. "You and your boys turn back." Maddox spat in the dust. "Your watch? Since when do ghosts run fences?" He tilted his head, eyes sliding toward Eliza. "Pretty little widow, ain't she? She know who you used to be?" Silas didn't move, but the twitch in his jaw was answer enough. Maddox's laugh cracked loud. "Oh, I get it now. Vance trying to wash his hands clean. Thought those stains come off if you played hero for a spell?" Silas said nothing, and in the space his silence left, the wind carried the smell of gun oil and horse sweat. Maddox stepped closer. "I ain't here for her. I'm here for you. That bounty might be stale, but I figure your head's still worth the sport." Eliza's voice trembled low. "Silas, what's he talking about?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Go inside," he said again. But she didn't move. The tension broke like bone. Maddox struck first, the punch landing hard across Silas's cheek. Another followed, then a knee to the gut, driving him into the dirt. He didn't draw. He took every blow, blood streaking down his face as Maddox laughed. "Still preaching nonviolence, preacher?" he taunted. "Where's that quiet shot now?" Silas coughed, tasting iron. "Buried," he rasped. "Where it belongs." "No," Maddox growled, pulling out his revolver and pressing it against Silas's forehead. "It belongs with us." He motioned to his men. "We move on the girl's property tonight. She's the bait. Then we're going south. Vance rides with us, or he dies right here." Silas shook his head, blood dripping from his lip. "You want that woman hurt, you'll have to kill me first." Maddox smiled coldly. Then I guess we'll let mercy be your tombstone." He slid the revolver back into its holster. "Not today, old friend. I want you awake when it all burns again." He turned to his men. "Mount up." As their horses pounded off into the horizon, Eliza rushed forward. Her hand shook as she knelt beside him. "What did he mean?" she demanded. "What did he call you? Quiet shot? Tell me." He looked away, wiping a smear of blood from his mouth. "An old name," he muttered, "not worth remembering." "You knew my father?" she said, voice breaking. "Didn't you?" He met her stare then, unable to lie any more. "Go inside," he said once more, softer than before. But she didn't. She rose, eyes flashing, understanding dawning slow and cruel. "You killed him?" she whispered. The air between them froze. "It was a long time ago," he said quietly. "I was drunk, angry, running with men who thought death paid better than labor. He drew first." "He never carried iron," she snapped. "You murdered him for $20. Silas didn't defend himself. The truth spoke loud enough. His silence felt heavier than any denial could. She turned from him, voice trembling between fury and tears. "Get off my land!" He didn't argue. He gathered his hat, limped to the fence post, and sat in the dirt till the horizon started bleeding orange. The gang's promise hung in the back of his head. We moved tonight. He couldn't leave her to them, not even if she wanted him gone. When darkness fell, he sat alone by the barn. Every creak of timber carried memory. Every gust of wind whispered Maddox's laughter. His ribs ached from the beating, but it was guilt that hurt worse. He'd built his solitude on the lie that time could erase what he'd done. Now time had simply drawn a circle, bringing him right back. He heard movement inside, Eliza tending the fire, maybe crying, maybe praying. He'd betrayed her twice, once with a bullet, then with a lie dressed as protection. He looked down at his revolver resting across his knees. "Guess penance don't end till a man stops breathing," he murmured. When moonlight began touching the edge of the tree line, Silas rose. He scanned the ridge to the north. 4 riders returning, their torches faint but unmistakable. He exhaled, steadying. Maddox keeps his word, he thought. Tonight would be the end of something. Maybe his curse, maybe his life. He didn't much care which. Inside, Eliza blew out the lantern, but through the shadows she watched him take position by the corral fence, one man against the dark. The feeling in her chest twisted, hate and pity tangled so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. She realized then what kind of ghost he really was, not the kind that haunted people, but the kind that begged to be buried. Morning came pale and sleepless. Silas sat near the coals of a dying fire, the sky just beginning to turn. When he turned his head toward the cabin, she was there on the step, eyes rimmed red from weeping. No words passed, because none were needed. Both knew the truth now, his guilt, her pain, and the fight still waiting beyond the ridge. He gave her a small nod, half apology, half farewell. She didn't return it. She only watched as the sun cut through the clouds, lighting the field where the blood would soon dry. Silas tightened the holster across his chest and caught his reflection in a shard of broken window, an old man, lined and weary, but finally ready to stand for something. Somewhere out there rode the last pieces of his past. He aimed to meet them with what little honor remained. Behind him, Eliza turned away, her voice raw but steady. "You don't have to fight," she said, though he was already walking. He paused at the gate, lifting his hat slightly. "If I don't," he said, "they'll keep coming. You deserve peace, even if I never find it." Then he walked toward the horizon, where the echo of hoofbeats rose once more. Dawn spread across the plains like fire finding dry wood. And in that glow, Silas Vance, the quiet shot reborn one final time, rode out to meet the devils he'd left behind. Before light touched the horizon, Silas was already awake. The air held that brittle stillness that comes before a storm, and the faint chill of dawn crept through his coat. He strapped on his gun belt, the leather stiff with age, the weight of it grounding him in the final truth he'd avoided too long. Today wasn't about vengeance. It was about facing the ledger he'd been carrying since Caleb Hensley fell into the mud. Eliza stood in the doorway as he tightened the buckle. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from sleepless hours, and tears she refused to let fall. "You don't need to do this," she said quietly. "Killing them won't change what you've done." He nodded once. "I know." His fingers brushed the revolver's worn handle. "Ain't about changing what's done. It's about stopping what's still happening." She stepped closer, her voice cracking. "You think dying makes you righteous? My father didn't believe that." He turned toward her, the lines in his face deep as the cracks in the earth outside. No, but maybe he'd believe a man can stop running. Every word cost him something. "I can't ask forgiveness, Eliza. I killed a good man for $20. That stain doesn't wash. But you deserve a world where his name doesn't die in the dirt." Her lip trembled, somewhere between anger and sorrow. She tried to speak, failed, then whispered, "Don't make me lose another one." Silas rested a hand on her shoulder, light and brief. "You won't lose me, not the way you think." He mounted up, the horse snorting softly in the half-light. She stayed in the doorway, arms crossed around herself like armor. He looked back once, and for the first time in decades, his expression carried peace. Plain, human, fragile. Then he rode out. The sky opened as he reached the valley. Steam lifted from wet sage, and the wind carried dust across the plain like the ghosts of every man he'd ever wronged. On the ridge, Maddox and his men waited. 4 figures outlined by firelight, torches stuck into the soil like claim markers on hell's own property. Silas drew rein 50 yards away and dismounted. "Maddox," he called, voice calm but carrying. "You said you'd come back. Guess I'm here to finish what we started." Maddox laughed, clapping a gloved hand against his saddle horn. "You got old, brother. Thought maybe you'd keep running till the desert swallowed you up." "Ran far enough," Silas said. "Now it's down to this." "Just you?" Maddox grinned, motioning to the others. "You plan to take 4 with one good arm and a conscience weighing you down?" Silas looked past him to the riders, a crooked lot of ghosts wearing skin. "Reckon conscience shoots straighter than whiskey ever did." Then he walked forward, boots crunching through the brittle grass, stopping at 10 paces. He drew his revolver slow, deliberate, like a prayer rather than a threat. Maddox spun his pistol and sneered. The first shot cracked the morning apart. One gunman dropped clean from his horse before his echo caught up. The second fired wide. Silas pivoted, his return slug taking the man through the thigh, spinning him into the dust. The third came screaming down from the ridge, rifle blazing. Silas ducked behind a fallen log, counted the beats between shots, rose, and fired twice. Both hit true. The man's body tumbled like a sack into the scrub. Only Maddox remained. Smoke hung between them, the smell of gunpowder mixing with sun-warmed sage. Maddox's grin wavered, but didn't fade. "Still quiet, eh? Thought maybe the preacher in you forgot how to aim." Silas stepped forward, bleeding from a crease along his ribs. "Didn't forget," he said. "Just changed what I'm aiming for." They circled, slow and deliberate, two men orbiting the same regret. Maddox raised his gun. "You should have joined me that night. Could have owned every town from here to Texas." "Owned?" Silas's tone hardened. "We took from people who had nothing, buried names that deserved to be spoken. I killed a man worth 10 of either of us. You're right. I should have died with the rest back then." Maddox fired. The bullet seared past Silas's shoulder, close enough to rip fabric and burn skin. Silas didn't flinch. He answered with a single shot that cracked Maddox's gun hand open. The revolver clattered into the dust. Maddox fell to his knees, clutching the wound, snarling like a cornered animal. "Finish it, Vance!" he shouted. "That's what you are. Killer, thief, sinner. Do what you do best." Silas walked closer, gun still raised, then stopped just out of reach. His breath came slow. "No, mercy's the only thing I never tried." He thumbed the hammer back, then eased it down, slipping the revolver into its holster. "Live with that." Maddox glared up at him, hatred fighting through pain. "You can't wash clean. You'll die a killer all the same." Silas almost smiled. "Maybe, but not his kind anymore." He turned away then, knees threatening to buckle as blood began soaking through his shirt. Maddox's shadow shifted, reaching for a hidden knife. The sunlight caught the edge just as it came up. Silas spun, too slow. The blade scraped his side, deep and hot. Reflex pulled his gun halfway, but the movement faltered halfway through. Another shot cracked, not his. From the ridge, Eliza's rifle spoke once, clean and deadly. Maddox toppled backward, knife slipping from his fingers, life leaving his eyes before his body hit the earth. Silas staggered. He turned toward the ridge, seeing her silhouette in the rising light, hair blown wild by wind. He tried to call out. Couldn't. His knees gave way. He fell beside the log that had shielded him earlier, blood darkening the dust. Eliza ran down the slope, dropping beside him. "Hold on," she whispered, pressing her hand over the wound, though she already knew it was useless. He managed a faint smile. "Told you you wouldn't lose me," he murmured. Then blood bubbled on his lip. "Guess I lied." "Don't," she said sharply. "You did what you came to do." He looked past her toward the sky, where clouds drifted white against blue. "He was brave," he whispered, voice almost gone. "Your father deserved better." She tightened her grip on his hand, tears streaking down the dirt on her cheeks. "So did you?" "Maybe now," he breathed. "Maybe now I can stop running." His eyes softened, finding hers one last time. "Thank you for mercy." Then his hand went still, the faintest smile fixed between guilt and peace. The wind rose through Cedar Creek, carrying dust and the faint scent of smoke. Eliza sat beside him until the light turned gold, until the birds began to sing again. When she stood, his gun still rested across his chest, his face calm as the desert itself. She closed his eyes, whispering a prayer not for redemption, but for rest. The battle had fallen silent, except for the low rasp of wind through sage. Eliza knelt beside Silas, her palms slick with his blood, pressing against the wound which no longer bled fast enough to matter. He breathed shallow, each exhale a shudder. The revolver rested between them, wood grip glinting against the dirt like a relic from another life. He opened his eyes and managed a grin that barely held shape. "Reckon this is it, huh?" "Don't talk," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "You're losing too much." He chuckled softly, a sandpaper sound. "Ain't much left to lose. Don't waste the truth." His gaze drifted toward where Maddox lay still. "Looks like we've finished it." Eliza followed his stare but said nothing. Around them, the field smelled of gunpowder and rain, life and decay balancing in uneasy peace. Silas coughed once, his body tightening before he forced a whisper. "You should know what happened. Your father, I never meant for it. I'd been drinking for days. Thought robbing him would buy me out of misery." Her jaw trembled. "And you took everything he had." He nodded faintly. $20. That was the price of a man better than me." His breath hitched. "Every sunrise since I've seen his face. Thought if I wandered far enough maybe it'd fade. But sins, they know how to follow a man." Eliza turned away, staring toward the broken fence and the smudge of cabin roof beyond the ridge. Anger pressed hot behind her eyes, battling the grief clawing its way through her chest. She had imagined this moment in nightmares. Her father's killer, begging, bleeding, repentant. None of them ever ended like this. Silas swallowed, the movement slow. "Don't reckon I've earned forgiveness. But if you got to speak something before I go, let it be truth. Hate me, if that keeps you alive." She met his gaze. "I did hate you. I wanted to see you hang." He nodded once. "Good. Means you cared." "But," she continued, voice shaking now, "if I keep hating you, he never rests, and neither will I." Silas blinked, confusion soft behind exhaustion. "Then what happens now?" Eliza brushed her fingers against the back of his hand, her expression hollowed by fatigue, but cleared of rage. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Not for you. For me. For him." The words seemed to stop time. Silas's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. When he found breath again, it came as a whisper. "Then maybe I can die clean?" She leaned closer as his eyelids began trembling with the effort of staying open. "Rest, Silas." He gave a weak laugh, almost peaceful. "Tell him I—" His tongue faltered. Breath slipped from his chest. His hand went still. Eliza sat back, tears falling freely now. The desert, indifferent as always, took the sound and swallowed it. The dawn had turned bright and merciless. She pulled a blanket from her saddlebag and covered him carefully, then crossed the field for the spade leaning near the corral. Hours later, she stood by 2 mounds beneath the cedar trees, one old, one freshly turned. She placed a single bullet between them, half buried so it caught the light. The wind sighed through the branches, brushing her face like a memory. She stayed there until the sky shifted gold, then mounted up. As her horse started east, she glanced once more toward the graves. "Both of you can rest now," she whispered. Then she rode, the sound of hoofbeats fading into quiet, carrying 2 ghosts behind her. Weeks passed. Cedar Creek began stitching itself back together under sun and sweat. New boards patched old bones. Smoke curled from rebuilt chimneys. The ruins that once marked loss now shaped a fragile kind of life. Along the hill above the ranch stood 2 rough stones, weathering side by side, the earth between them blooming with wildflowers after the spring rain. Eliza worked the land alone, same as her father once had. Each dawn she carried water, fixed fences, and spoke softly to the wind as if still reporting the day's chores. Travelers passing through sometimes asked whose graves those were. Her answer was always simple: men who tried to do right, one too late and one too soon. In nearby towns, Stories spread faster than her crops could grow. They spoke of an outlaw called the Quiet Shot, a man who turned his gun against his own gang to save a woman bearing his victim's name. Some believed it, some didn't, but every version ended the same way, with the outlaw refusing to fire his last shot and choosing mercy instead. Saloon talk turned him into a ghost flickering across the plains, warning off thieves and drifters. The preacher in Oak Bend claimed his grave glowed some nights, though whiskey might have helped the vision. Either way, his name moved through the frontier like a prayer half remembered. Silas Vance, sinner turned guardian. One evening, Eliza stood on the porch, the horizon washed in copper light. The air hummed with crickets, the faint creak of her father's windmill turning steady. She wiped dust from her hands and looked toward the hill. 2 headstones caught the sunset, shining like coins laid for passage. Her voice barely carried, but the breeze answered as though it could hear, "Peace to you both." The last rays faded behind the ridge. Over the empty plain, the world held still, soft, forgiving, quiet. Some debts weren't settled by gold or blood, she thought, but by mercy. If you want more stories of outlaws who face their ghosts beneath the dust and silence of the wild frontier, subscribe and ride with us into the next tale.